Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Dan Anthony. I am the executive director of We Pay the Tariffs, which is a new small business coalition that was launched this year to highlight the impacts of all the various tariffs that have been announced, imposed, rollback, amended, announced again over the course of this year. Since launching in April, we've now grown our network to over 800 small businesses throughout the country. We've got five of them here on this call today, all small businesses on the retail side who are here to talk about the impacts of small business on the holiday shopping season. We've got a good mix of industries here. We've got some food, musical instruments, toys and games, and actual holiday decorations. We've also pulled together some new data, so I'm going to do a brief run through of that on in terms of tariff costs for some of these specific issues. I am not going to spend a lot of time on that. Data can be dry. So while I think it's interesting, I am more than happy to talk to anyone after this. We'll share this slide deck. But just to give a sense of how things are changing, and then we'll turn it over to each of the small business owners to share their stories. And then we'll open it up to questions. We'll be moderating. So if you want to put questions into the Q&A, you can do that, and we'll sort of start doing those now if you have them and you know you're going to ask them, and then we'll be able to work through as many as we can once the brief presentations are over. So as I mentioned, we have pulled together some data on some key holiday items. And we'll start right off with the obvious here. And so looking at the tariff costs associated with Christmas decorations, what we've got here is we've got 9 or 10 different sectors. And again, we'll share this. But just in the last 12 months, over $400 million in extra tariffs paid. It was about typically $25 to $50 million a year is your norm, and you can just see how that spikes across the end. This is not because imports are growing. Imports have grown about 3% over the last year. It is wholly attributed to that rise in average tariffs from under 1% to 23.3%. And so this is just sort of your starting off point of the actual nuts and bolts of decorating for the holidays, with everything going up in cost. And we do have Jared, who will be able to talk about that today in a little bit more detail and how that's affecting his company. We've also got Boyd, who will be able to talk about sort of the board game and trading card space. Again, this is something that was not subject to tariffs at all prior to this year. And now, in the last really few months, an extra $73 million in tariffs paid. I'll note here that this data is only through August. Because of the government shutdown, there are delays in data releases. And so this is something we should have the September data already. Hopefully we'll get that soon, but we're really just getting into when a lot of these peak holiday imports would be coming in. So these numbers should be rising rapidly going forward. But again, that jump from no tariffs at all to an average rate of 22.5% on imports from the world, obviously significant in terms of how costs work. Toys, another one, duty free totally before the end of this year. And so now we've got average rates of over 22% on everything that's coming in. This is a sector that is very, very dependent on imports. And so an extra $1.2 billion in tariffs paid over the last couple months alone. And again, that is something that's going to keep going up. Musical instruments, this is a little bit different. We have always had some tariffs on musical instruments. You can see that they jumped up back in 2019 when we imposed tariffs on China, and then they really rose during the pandemic as people spent more money when they were home during the day, but that was starting to come back down. This is an area that's really taken off, and even so, it increased from 6% to almost 21%. Um, Speakers and headphones, this is another big category in terms of electronics that have not been exempted. A lot of tariffs have, a lot of consumer electronics products have been exempted from tariffs to date. This is one of those outliers. And again, you just see that real spike up to almost $800 million, where the norm was more like 200 million. Video game consoles, I don't know. I have an 11-year-old, so I'm not sure how many of you may have children, but this is certainly on the list of things that are sought after. And again, just not made in the United States. So hundreds of millions of dollars in extra tariffs on those consoles. And you've seen some of those price announcements throughout the year in terms of prices going up on different popular games. Um, Wine and spirits. This is one that we threw in. It's a big part of the holiday season here, um, but it also shows that these trade wars aren't necessarily new. Wine and spirits were covered as part of a dispute between the U.S. and the EU previously, and so you saw that big run up a few years back. That got resolved, and now we're right back in it. And so there is another group that's got their slogan, I believe, is Toast, Not Tariffs. I think that's something that most of those folks on the call would agree with, even though we're not necessarily in the wine and spirit space. And finally, pet products. This is an area that's really big and growing. It's another area where we get to see some contrast. I really like that you see a spike in tariffs paid on pet products from mid 2020 to 2022. People were home adopting more animals, getting them more toys. So that's a nice run up in tariffs. Right now, though, you've actually had the volume of imports declining while the tariffs spike back up to those high levels. So it's as if we were buying our pets lots of toys, but we're not. We're getting the same amount of toys, a little bit less, and just paying a whole lot more for them. Um, and finally, apparel. Again, this is something that this is a space where tariffs are traditionally high. I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize um, uh, how high of tariffs apparel generally faces. So we're starting to see that run up a rapid rise, but this is a little less of a shock to the apparel system because they're a little bit more used to it. But again, 27% tariffs on apparel from anywhere in the world. Again, this varies by country, but when you average it out, this is a very big driver of clothing costs. Um, for anyone that wants to know more about this, again, you can reach out to any of the names here if you've got specific press requests. But we've had a lot of people ask, hey, do you know anyone in this area? And so you can check out our impact map and it'll let you click around the country and see which businesses are there. So if you are from local press and you're looking to tell those stories, that's a great starting point. And then we can try to connect you. And then also, that page also has state by state costs, similar to what we did here in terms of data costs, but actually breaking it down by state in terms of how much tariffs have risen in each state. So, uh, again, I was going to try to keep this brief, not bore everyone, but thank you for indulging me on the costs. Like I said, if you have further questions or you want to know about specific products, we're happy to dig into our data sets and do that. But without further ado, we'll turn it over to the folks who are actually living this day to day. And I guess we'll start with Joann. So, Joann, if you can briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're facing.
My name is Joann Cartiglia, and I own a sweet little toy company called the Queen's Treasures. Everything is historically based. My furniture is fully assembled. It's all made by hand. It is more affordable than other brands, and it's made of materials that go in the attic and not the landfill. I am 64 years old. I was planning an exit in the next 2 years. My husband and I have invested a lot of our retirement money into this business. And now I have absolutely no hope of retirement. I don't have a business I can sell because the supply chain is so erratic at this point. We have a license and our license, which I'm not mentioning the name, but they will be, um, they've already filmed a new series that will appear on streaming channels next year. That should have been like a huge win for us. Meanwhile, we don't have the money or the margin to pay an extra 30%. Toy companies and most importers have to pay for their product before it arrives at our shores. And then for a toy company, it's going to sit in your warehouse until November and December. So to find an extra 30% to pay the government is really an impossibility. We have one container that is coming in this year out of what should have been about 12 containers. Sadly, our website is just full of out of stock, ETA subject to tariffs. Our sales so far in November are 50% down to last year because of availability. And in the meantime, I am trying to reinvent myself so I don't have to declare bankruptcy for someone who doesn't have any bills that are past due. But I started a little gourmet food company that's licensed, which I don't really have the money to launch properly. And I've opened a retail store now in what was our pick and pack room for our company. We have a lot of space in our warehouse that's not being used. So, uh, considering toys, 73% of them are made in China for a good reason. That is because of the labor that's involved in creating a toy. It's because of the shelf life of a toy and the cost of retooling machinery. And I doubt that anyone on this call could actually afford, in their wildest dreams, to open a factory or bring it back here. I'd love to. But no such option is available to us. So this isn't, in my opinion, it's an assault on small business and innovation because when we should be creating new products, we're not. And yet, ch- Chinese direct brands will be able to get data on what is selling on like Amazon, and they create a like item that is 60% lower than what we could sell it for because their cost of living is 60% lower. So we're fighting for our American lives. And I hope our president understands that he has literally put the American dream to bed.
Thanks, Joanne. Next, we'll turn it over to Boyd.
Thanks, Dan. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful. My name is Boyd Stevenson. I am the owner of Game Castle College Park in College Park, Maryland. We're a tabletop hobby gaming store. We've been open for 4 years and 4 days. We just celebrated our anniversary. We sell specialized toys and games, so things like Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer 40K. If you have that creative and fun friend that does weird gaming things, we're probably the people he does it with. We also sell a lot of board games, and as well as accessories like miniatures products, paints for those miniatures, and dice. We also are very much a play space. About 60% of my square footage is dedicated to space for people to come in and play games with each other. So just as much as we're a retail space, we're an event space, challenged by getting product to people because if they don't have the product to play in their tournaments, they cannot play with each other. Um, Most of my suppliers are small producers, which is great. It means that I know most of my suppliers by face and I can call them when I need things. That's even true for some of the really big ones. You all may have heard of companies like Critical Role. But the size of the industry also means that we don't have that leverage to get tariff exemptions the way that you've seen for a lot of larger, more connected industries. And it also means that most of my manufacturers and publishers don't really have the space to absorb or to pass on price increases to their customers. So they're getting squeezed. The number of toy and game studios that I have seen go under this year is massive. I have seen one local studio that used to have over 30 employees is now down to 8. Um, and we've also seen a lot of changes in the way the market works. Trading card games, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Digimon, those cards used to get produced, in Belgium, in the US, in Canada, in Japan, and a little bit in China, and they could kind of get sent around wherever. This year, they continue to be produced in those places, but we saw massive supply shocks in the US with price increases. Some of these products doubling in price, going from like $50 a pack to over 100. And it wasn't because there was a shortage of the product, it was because there was a shortage of the product in the US because the stuff that had been printed in Europe and in Asia and even in Canada could not get here. Um, I also saw one area that we don't, or that we do actually have a lot of manufacturing capacity in the United States, is for playing cards. And at our largest trade show of the year, I saw a lot of games that I have seen moving through the stage of development. And this year at Gen Con, all of a sudden that game had been retooled, whereas before it might have had a large board, it might have had some interesting pieces, and it might have been structured around something else. And now all of a sudden it has been reconfigured to be a card game. And why is that? It's because the US does have good card game capacity. And what might have been a larger, more interesting, and frankly better selling product, people had to retrench. Um, and just to kind of give some ideas about our industry, tabletop gaming, we expect to do about 40% of our revenue during the fourth quarter every year. Tariff uncertainty means that normally when I'm projecting our numbers 30, 60, 90 days out, I'm essentially doing it month to month right now. And halfway through the month, I sit down and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like, do I need to change my our product ordering budget? Which is really scary. Those trading card games I mentioned, that's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Prices are up about 20%. Board games is a massive industry from games all the way down to, tiny little games, all the way up to huge things like Twilight Imperium that have a giant box. But we've seen the prices on them go up from anywhere between $5 and $20. Role-playing games like D&D, we've seen those books go up in price by about 20%. And our accessories, things like paints, dice, miniatures, those have all also risen in price by about 20%. So we have definitely been hit. And, and up until a month ago, I'd be saying, and hey, most of the federal workforce isn't employed either. So we're hunkering down for a terrifying holiday season. But we're still pretty scared, even with the shutdown being over. Thanks.
Thanks, Boyd. Next up, we'll go to Jared, Village Lighting.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everybody for sharing your story. It's educational too, and it's just tough to see what everybody's going through. It's rough. I do Christmas. We do holiday storage, decor, and solutions. We've been in business for over 20 years. We have to place our orders a year in advance. I do 100 plus containers a year. We place orders last December, and we're approaching $1 million in tariffs this year that weren't in the budget, weren't in the forecast, and frankly, weren't in the cash flow. So we had to finance that. When we place our orders early in December and through the several following few months, about 50% of our sales are fixed. They're agreements made with our customers, and so we've sold a lot of that goods to them directly at a loss, and then we have whatever's left in stock to sell through our retail channels the next 2 months to make up the difference and to pay back the loans. And so at this point, we've kind of transitioned from working for profits to working for tariffs. We are just in business to pay off our tariff debt, and then we will look ahead to next year. Now, the interesting thing about that, and I think I speak for a lot of the Christmas industry, is when you place orders so far in advance and base your orders and forecasting on the numbers at hand when you place the orders, and then everything nosedives, you will have an excess in some cases of inventory, and you don't have the luxury of increasing the pricing as much as you need to recoup the tariffs. And so a lot of us are just barely making it by and selling things for as little of an increase. Now, we are increasing 5 to 10%, maybe more, but those increases aren't even close to covering our actual tariff outputs. Not to mention the fact that container costs also spiked due to the policy shifts and the inability to plan. This was a logistics price hike, much like the COVID year. And so not only are we paying back tariffs, but we're also paying extremely high logistics bills. Shipments are late, and there was chaos in the logistics world. And so all of those expenses and costs are being absorbed to a large part by the companies through whatever means they have to absorb them. But it's important to note that whatever price increases you're seeing in the holiday industry for your Christmas trees, for your lighting, for your other decor, this year will be small compared to next year if tariff relief isn't given for the 2026 season. Just trying to make it, just trying to break even is not really an option, obviously, for a business for a long sustainable period. So this year we've been a little sheltered in that companies are taking the hit, but next year will get worse. Now, that being said, we have seen dramatic price increases in many items. For example, any wreaths or garlands that might have been $179 in a normal season might be $189 or $199. Lighting has gone up, trees have gone up. Across the board, you have seen increases, but they will continue to increase in future seasons. Now, one last note, American manufacturing has never done Christmas goods, so it's not responsible for taking away any jobs. The supply chain for Christmas items is simply too complex and would take billions of dollars and decades to build that infrastructure to move that production here. And then even if you did, the workforce is not sufficient to support it. And so the Christmas industry, as important as it is to all of us in our celebrations every year, is not simply something that America can actually produce. And so we hope, that in the coming months that there might be some tariff relief made as things change, as policies adjust to this new reality of inflation and cost increases, to help us all out, to take a closer look at those things that simply don't make sense, that aren't part of national security, that could be exempted, that could be waived, so that we can move forward with our businesses, and then those industries that could benefit from more localized U.S. Manufacturing could flourish while we're protected and doing what we do.
Thanks, Jared. We'll turn it over to Aaron next.
Hey folks, I'm Aaron Brown, owner of Town Center Music just outside of Atlanta. Our slogan is "We make music makers." We primarily sell guitars, but we sell a lot of other musical goods. And we are in the privileged position of fighting the fight on two different fronts. Core inflation, directly caused by the tariffs, has really eaten into our sales. We are a discretionary good. People are always buying food or clothes before they buy a guitar, which makes sense. That's what I do too. However, it has been increasingly difficult for us to make those sales as things like grocery prices have gone up. Our October sales were down by 24%. That was a really rough hit to take. Everything for us from the beginning of the year up until about April was trending upward, and then October seems to be sort of the latest of the bad news. The other front that we are fighting on are tariffs on our goods. Our prices have gone up. We've had one major manufacturer have 3 price hikes since April for a total of 15%. On an instrument that's $300. That's something to take note of. We also lost out on $12,000 worth of sales during our busiest month of the year, August, which is back to school time. We couldn't get $12,000 worth of instruments into our store because like Jared said, the confusion in the ports over who's paying who what and things like that. We just could not get the instruments in to be able to sell to school kids. The whole of our intro to intermediate products are made offshore. That's just the way our industry has been since about 1968. If you look at a US made acoustic, you're looking at something that starts in the $1,200 range. If you're looking at an acoustic that's made in Indonesia or a place like that, you're looking at $119. Well, as of right now, we're up to $149 and climbing. That really kneecaps our ability to create new buyers for what we have. I'm on a main road here. I still get dozens of folks that come in every week that say, I've always wanted to do this, or a parent with a child that says, I always wanted to do this, but I just never had the time, or I thought it was going to be too expensive. Well, at this point, these cost increases are definitely playing into those fears. So in that way, tariff policy is sort of an existential thing for the industry that I'm in. If prices keep going up, fewer folks are going to buy, which means the industry doesn't grow. Many of our guitar builders rely on internationally sourced tone woods. We don't grow things like rosewood here. We don't grow mahogany here. We can't. We just can't. You can't pick those trees up and move them here. They're going to die. And then we can't build stuff with them. Tariffs have put a big dent in that. Our industry is also home to a lot of small made in the USA guitar effects brands. We have a bunch of them here in the South, many of whom I'm friends with. To hear them tell me about their tariff bills on tiny electronic components that they use to build their stuff. I had one friend share with me that he paid a $1,200 tariff bill on $450 worth of parts. These are little components, resistors, capacitors, things like that, that they're not made here. They've never been made here. We're talking like post World War II tech that we rely on to make our loud rock and roll sounds. They're just becoming too expensive for these folks to bring in, and therefore they can't build the stuff that they sell. That really puts a hitch in this whole bring manufacturing back to the US thing. It's been really hard to watch my friends go through this as well. Our industry as a whole is smaller than the entirety of the US toothpaste industry. That's an important thing to note because we are basically driven by two large chains that are relying on sales volume to compensate for lower margins as well as higher sale prices. I just don't have the volume to be able to compete with that. I know many other store owners don't have that as well. I happen to think that what we do is a moral good. I don't know anybody whose life hasn't been made better by the products that we sell, directly or indirectly, by listening to a band that they love play these things. So it's been really hard to sit through this and watch, kind of like Boyd. We're a niche industry. We happen to think that we foster a community that we really need. We teach 120 students here every week to play. Um, Watching all of these things be tossed around by a policy that seems capricious at best has been hard to take, and that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Aaron. You'll be happy to know that this little blurry thing in my background is an electronic drum kit that I bought earlier this year with my son so that we can both sit there and play the drums. So we're doing our part,
Awesome.
but I figured I would blur my background rather than let folks see that. And then finally, Anne from Scottish Gourmet.
Hi, I'm Ann. I'm the founder and owner of Scottish Gourmet. We're located in Greensboro, North Carolina, and we've been in business for 20 years. I've been struck by the comments made by my fellow panelists. You are all struggling, and it's hard for me to say what I'm going to say next. The tariffs have affected us in a lot of ways. Mainly, it's made it incredibly difficult to plan ahead. We have been growing very quickly. I took over my nearest competitor last fall, And when the tariffs were announced and the gloom and the doom that was predicted to make the economy crash, I pulled back a bit to protect my small company. I didn't know how to project sales. I didn't know what to do in terms of purchasing inventory. I've got a 90 to 120 day supply chain, not a year like Jared. I didn't know how much money I needed to borrow in order to finance my growth, how many people I should hire, how much more space I should need. I was growing at 40%. And I just decided that I had to cut back. So I cut my plans back to a 15 to 20%. And meanwhile, those tariffs that went into effect was 10% on everything I bought from Scotland. I mean, you can't make Scottish food in America and call it Scottish food. And we also had the drop of the value of the dollar, which also hurt my purchasing. And that hit another 7 to 8%. I do buy some small inexpensive gifts, some Christmas ornaments made in China, and I also buy baskets made in Vietnam. So when the Liberation Day happened, I pushed those purchases early. I brought everything in the door early to avoid the tariffs. And then, of course, we didn't have 100% on Christmas ornaments. But that required spending money sooner than usual, and it forced me to do some expensive borrowing. We raised prices to offset the tariffs we paid. And in the last 33 months, I've paid an extra $30,000 on top of the tariffs I would have already normally paid. I feel for you, Jared, at $1 million. 30,000 was a lot for me. We've also been hit by worldwide price increases on coffee, tea, chocolate, beef, because I'm in the food world. My best-selling cookie went from $9 to $11. Even all my Walker's shortbread went up by $1 a box. I raised prices in the hopes that the goods would sell and that I would be able to recoup the tariffs that I paid. I also raised my price of ornaments $1 or $2 each. I have a silly Piper duck, rubber duck toy. He went from $10 to $14 because I had to pay 50% on him. But the good news is our holiday sales are here. Today, I'm probably going to ship more boxes than I've ever shipped on any single day in the company's history. We're still growing at 30%. So now it means I'm leaving a lot of money on the table. I couldn't plan ahead. I couldn't anticipate the growth. I didn't know what was going to happen. And the chaos that has caused by the tariffs and the huge uncertainty that they created have left us now with expensive debt, higher prices, and lost sales. It seems my customers are well-heeled enough not to complain. Some have a little, and the sales of my best-selling cookie are flat to down at the $11 price. But I'm on the good news side of the story here. I've also been hit with this de minimis exemption issue. Not that I was trying to avoid any tariffs, but shipments that I had got stuck in the huge, massive wave of stuff that got stored in trailers at UPS for 2 months. And I am now finally getting some of those goods in the door. So this chaos has caused a great deal of difficulty in planning, and it means I haven't hired as much. I didn't take on as much space as I probably should have. And, what's going to happen next year? Am I going to make up what I lost this year? I don't know. That's my story.
Thanks, Ann. And I think that's really something that frequently gets missed is even if we avoid the worst case scenario, like how much better could it have been without trying to navigate all these? And so
Well,
we'll switch over.
Joann, you said you're in your 60s and planning retirement. I'm
Yeah,
71.
I was.
And I want, and I have a goal of where I want this company to be so that I can sell it as a very good ongoing business. And this year is making it difficult.
We're going to jump over to some questions here, and so I know Ann and Jared already sort of answered this, but question on have you taken out loans to pay tariffs? Just figuring out who else among the panelists have taken out loans to finance these costs.
I have. And their mafia rates that you wind up getting, that's my expression for them, because even your credit cards are, rates are obscenely high. And I use my credit cards to finance my business. When you're in an industry where you lose money every month and make it up, hopefully in November and December, you are really just like, the Christmas decorations, you're relying on borrowing.
The follow-up there was what sort of rates are we talking about?
Anywhere from 17% to I have a PayPal credit card that gives you 6 months interest free. If you do not pay the minimum due or pay what comes up, it's 30.99% interest. If you miss that 6 month point, which thankfully I have never done. Yeah, it's crazy.
Thank you. Anyone else want to answer?
I've got loans from 8% and my worst is 22.
We had a question early on. Are you aware of any small businesses that have filed for bankruptcy or went out of business and stopped operating? I've heard it anecdotally, seen it online, but I'm curious if any of the panelists here know others in your industry or perhaps just others that you've talked to who have stopped operating.
I had a vendor who most of their sales, I believe, were imported instruments. The company was G&L Guitars. They just vanished. It was really hard for me to get information from them. They wouldn't return any calls. But that I think that would be an issue worth looking into with them. I know that the tariffs hit them pretty hard, having their manufacturing of those instruments be in Indonesia. That was a pretty difficult one for them to weather, and they just vanished, just fell off.
Same thing in the tabletop space. Cool Mini or not, CMON. They are primarily a crowd-funded vendor, pretty famous for doing 3 or 4 a year that bring in over $10 million each, as well as then bringing their products into retail. And they have completely shut down. Greater Than Games is a medium-sized tabletop gaming producer, so probably 5 to 6 titles a year. Same thing, they went down despite the fact that their big release in 2024 was an Origins Award winner, which is pretty much, guaranteed that the product that you have is going to move for probably another 2 or 3 years. And they just said we can't make the math work. We've done it now rather than struggle through all of this. We're closing our doors. Locally, North Star Games, which is they produce, many of you may be familiar with Wits and Wagers. It's a pretty popular party game, and they went from a staff of over 30 to 8 now.
Will tell you that I actually even looked into reorganization, which winds up that you need to come up with about $40,000 just to file for that. The other side of the coin is I took advantage of the economic injury loans that the government gave out post-COVID to help you through the shipping crisis, which was a disaster for many importers. And the interest rate was very low. It's a 30-year term. It is a personal guarantee. So even if my business, and I honestly feel the government is putting me out of business, It's not that I'm not working hard. It's not that I don't have a great product. It's not anything I'm doing. The government is forcing me to look at things I never want to look at. So quite frankly, at 64, bankruptcy, personally, I'm having my first granddaughter in a couple of weeks. You know, I worked hard to be the grandmother that would put away for her college, that would take the whole family on vacations, that would spoil her. I have great toys I could give her, thank God. But, you know, that dream and her world of being able to do what I did with no college education to start a company with just my designs. I mean, that's something that's gone now. It's really gone. So sorry, guys. It's an emotional thing for this old lady.
I'm sorry, Joann. There's
Hey,
one other perspective, Dan, that's interesting, and maybe you guys also saw stuff similar to this happen. But as soon as Liberation Day hit, that April few weeks, large companies, maybe small, were just dumping orders to their Asian suppliers. They were canceling them, especially in the holiday industry. They may have ordered 1 million trees and canceled 50% of them. So the ripple effect of damaged economy extends far beyond our borders. And as humans, I feel like this isn't just about the USA. I love the relationships I have with my suppliers. And the fact that I will spend this much money to give them to make my goods so that I can spend this much money on logistics, marketing, employees, staff, R&D on this side of the ocean is fine with me, because this much that we give our partners overseas is also helping them feed their families, and what they do helps me feed mine. And we were tremendously irresponsible in many cases with canceling orders and throwing purchase orders that they'd already invested in back at them when times got tough. And so the damage was really felt on both sides, and that makes me sad that we inflicted that kind of damage to the people that we work with.
that is so true. 75% of most small American brands' income is spent in the United States. That foreign country gets a fraction of it. You know, if he wants to make a level playing field, put tariffs on foreign owned companies that don't have a stake in the United States, that aren't employing US citizens, that aren't investing, that aren't spending at the local deli or the pizza parlor or hiring a landscaper or whatever. Instead, all of these industries are going to be affected. I've fired my landscapers. We are doing our own renovations, things like that. This hits the economy in ways that we haven't even realized yet. It's not just a store, a consumer, or a brand. It is every single small business and person in the US.
I'm going to try to roll a couple questions sort of into one. And so there was a question about how this Black Friday might be different. A question on whether you're seeing a shift to people buying more US made product, and how this all continues into next year, whether we keep seeing costs go up. They're all sort of in this theme of, you know, I suppose, are the tariffs working? Are they changing patterns? And so, um, anyone who wants to hit on sort of one of those topics or one or more of them would be great.
I'll jump in and just say that in my industry, I've not had, I can't recall anyone actually asking if there were options to be made in the USA. It's such a kind of a, I don't know, I think most people may accept the fact that we trade on many of these goods. We simply trade, and that's okay. If I were purchasing something that was more expensive, then I recognize that I would be willing to pay X for something made in the USA. I recognize the value of that, and I'm not opposed to that. I love the idea, but it's an investment in quality, I would hope, and in things that I would assume would be applicable to a USA made item. In my case, Black Friday, we're hopeful. We are doing all that we can to make it successful, but we know the margins just aren't there. But we also know that people don't expect our goods to be made in the USA. They expect them to be at a price point. And that is where we'll live or die, is within a price point that people are able to afford. Made in the USA with many items in our category, if not most items, simply isn't realistic. And if it were able to be done, it's not affordable. So therefore, a Black Friday with a made in the USA Christmas decor line would be very miserable because no one could afford it.
Same for toys. Most toys.
So, Dan, I will say that we have a program here where we sticker a lot of our products with we call it the Designed in the DMV sticker, which stands for the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. And I think most of our customers, at least I hope most of our customers, know that most of these products are manufactured abroad. But we have seen, since we put those stickers out, a whole lot of folks really getting involved with favoring those products in a way. And maybe that's that localist irredentist effect. But to some degree, I think it is a lot of people looking at things and saying, to the extent that I want to keep the money in the local economy, this is a way that I can put a portion of that. And honestly, that's a pretty good system where you let your consumers know that the most that they can reasonably expect to keep in the local economy or the domestic economy is happening, while letting them know the truth is that this is just an area that, you know, you I understand everyone is like, oh, board game pieces can't be that difficult to manufacture. Well, let me tell you, you are wrong. And the fact of the matter is that really there's about 6 factories that do it really well. And guess what? They're all in China within about 80 miles of each other.
I think the difference with China is their product is labor. That is their product. They will build factories in regions that are rich in whatever material they would need, and they create a factory to produce your design. And for those people that think it's a slave labor thing, I have gotten a little hate now and then from that. It is not at all that way. I've been to China 67 times. They live pretty well. Yes. Are there pockets of poor people? Absolutely. But when you're dealing with an economy that is 60% cheaper to live than the US, that is why a brand can bring in a product. They can make enough money to pay American salaries, American rents, American insurance, American everything, and invest in this country. You know, what kind of jobs do we want to bring here? That's the other side of the coin, or bring back. How about customer service jobs? I'd love to get an American on the phone when I have a problem with a product, or Amazon, or whomever. Those are the jobs we should be trying to save, not hand painting something.
I've heard this come up on a prior call we did, saying of the value of their product, you know, it was $15, $2 of it is the actual manufacturing overseas, and why are we trying so hard to get that $2 rather than being happy with the 13 that we're actually capturing? But the conversation here just reminded me of that. Question on refunds, and I suppose I'll say that I've done work in the past on refunds of tariffs, and I'm pretty confident that it can be done. Whether it happens is a totally different question. And so I guess I'm going to switch this up a little bit and get a sense from you all. What would you do if you got your money back? I mean, what are the plans for you? I know there's paying down debts, but I think that's something that's also missing is a conversation of what are the potential benefits if these tariffs are struck down and the money goes back to the businesses.
I'd have an immediate reduction in my prices. My business would boom even more.
I agree with that. We would adjust pricing, of course, and then we would pay back the debt that we incurred and paying for it. So it would certainly make my life a lot easier.
For
Same
those
here.
of us at the end of the chain, that the tariff costs are folded into what we pay, the refunds they don't they're not going to get to me. I mean, I'm still going to have lost out on those sales. I'm still going to have lost out on any of those. I mean, I think it's a good thing, and I think that those that paid into these tariffs need to get them back. But when you have a store like I've got, it wouldn't affect me a whole lot.
And taking what Aaron said the step further, because we're in the exact same situation, the other people that aren't going to get the tariff back are the final retail customer. Like, there's no refund waiting for them. No one's going to come in and say, oh, because, the tariffs were refunded and someone got money back. No one's going to come knocking on your door as the final customer of a musical instrument, or a game or toy product and say, hey, here's some money for you. That's money's lost to you.
Yeah, and the sense I get is, as it works down the chain, it's sort of and doing an immediate price reduction and Jared, which means that if you guys are buying from them, you're getting an immediate price reduction. It's a pay it forward type thing so that future prices go down. But every day they stay in place, the tariffs do a little bit more damage that is not going to be undone.
We did not
Um,
raise our prices on anything we didn't produce during this year. So whatever we had stock on, we kept the price the same. So, but I'd like to be able to plan and innovate.
we've got a question here. Are you or your suppliers making any changes to product design in response to tariffs? Trying to get a sense of how tariffs might be changing the way products look and feel. I know, Boyd, you gave the example of people shifting games to be more card dominant, rather than something else. But I don't know if there's others who have seen those specific design changes. Are we getting guitars out of different types of wood?
No, not quite yet. There's just our industry is such a traditionalist based thing that everybody wants things a specific way. And really there are a lot of woods that just don't work. They need to be a certain hardness, things like that. But it's the traditionalism that keeps things entrenched here. They're just not gonna change.
I can take the packaging issue a little bit further. Um, it is not uncommon, especially for smaller card games, if anyone's familiar with games like Flux or Cacta or Flip 7. Um, it's pretty normal for the first print run of those to have like a slightly fancier, bigger box and things like that. And then repeat runs are going to look more like what you've seen on a peg at a lot, even at like the 7-Eleven, where it's literally just the cards, a little lip on top of it, and hanging on a peg. And that allows them to do the second print run at a much lower cost. And I have seen a lot of producers sort of skipping over that first print run step and saying we're just going to go straight to the second. It may not have the shelf presence while the game has a lot of buzz, but we're going to hope that that buzz draws people to purchase, despite the fact that the product packaging may not be as flashy as it was last time around.
I have changed a lot of my gift packaging. I assemble a lot of gifts, put some cookies, some candy, some jams or jellies together in a theme. And I've, with baskets, basically stopped being made in China during COVID. They didn't ever go back. A lot of it moved to Vietnam, and the tariffs on Vietnam are high too. I've basically gone back to having only two baskets left in my line. Everything else is packed in a box, and those boxes are made custom for me here in America. So that's a major design change for me. But they're beautiful tartan boxes. They look Scottish.
And
In
I,
the
as I said, started a gourmet food line because I can have it mixed in the US by a co-packer. Kind of off brand, but it's something.
But the holiday
Um,
industry, as we mentioned, we did this a year ago, so we haven't had a chance to change. But you will see a decrease in variety as people consolidate SKUs. You will see a cutting of corners. If you had a tree or some garland with 1,000 lights, it might have 800. The things will just get watered down, and so you will be paying the same, if not more, for less, and that will be an ongoing trend.
there's a question here on sort of the escalation of costs, and so sales tax on top of the tariff fees and credit card swipe fees that are now on a higher price. Um, I'm just wondering if anyone has given any thought to how much this snowballs into your prices and other costs that are unrelated. I've heard this in the past um, in the sense of financing. We took out a loan to pay the tariff, and if we get our tariff payment back, doesn't mean that we get any of the interest that we paid on the loans back. So it's still a loss, but I'm just curious if you see that sort of creeping into other areas that are a little less obvious.
Yeah, that's fundamental to what we do. If we pay more for an item, the price goes up. That means sales tax goes up, and that means a percentage based card swipe fee goes up. This is not just an isolated one fee thing. This compounds every expense.
A
Yeah,
very
ripple
quick
effect of
question. Oh,
the ripple effect of the tariffs goes far reaching from, like you mentioned, from the credit card fees to the logistics to shipping. There is probably quite an in-depth study that could be very enlightening to see how much we've truly paid in addition to the tariffs this year, just to stay alive, just to keep the doors open.
And everybody
um,
wants free shipping. And shipping costs, USPS, UPS, FedEx have all increased dramatically. And, we have to build shipping into the cost of our product. So it's really not free to consumers, but consumers want free shipping. They don't want an extra charge. So that has already caused increases without the tariffs on top of that and the credit card fees that we are absorbing. Most companies don't.
a very quick one. Has anyone put on a Trump tariff sales tax line onto their invoices?
We're in Georgia. No.
I can tell you that my website absolutely states sorry, tariff priced if I had to increase the price. Uh, and if it's out of stock, I call a spade a spade. That is why it's out of stock because of tariffs. Consumers need to know.
Well, we are up on an hour here, and so thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joann and Jared and Boyd and Aaron and Ann for doing this. I think it's really great to hear the firsthand because everyone has some overlap, but everyone has issues that really they are just dealing with, and really appreciate you sharing it. Um, for any of the media on the call, we have these five, but many, many other who are also willing to talk. And so if you're looking to write stories on specific topics or specific areas, please let us know how we can help connect you with people who can tell these stories. I generally don't know any of the answers, but someone does because they're living it, and that's really what we're hoping to do is to provide those connections. Um, and again, if there's any questions on the data, that is where I am more helpful. And you can reach out and we can pull either local data, we can pull different products, different sectors, whatever might be most useful to you. But with that, we'll go ahead and close this out and thank you again to everyone who joined.
Thanks so much for having
Thank you.
us.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Dan.
you.